Hey guys, and welcome back to Franchise Nation. I am your host, Moonlightswami, and today I'm bringing you guys the prospect spotlight for the defense for the New Orleans Saints franchise for this draft class. So as of right now, we covered all of the offense. If you missed that, make sure to go back and check it out. It was uploaded earlier this week or last week or somewhere in there. And as of right now, we're on to the defense. The defense is interesting this year because the linebackers are thin, the corners are decent, safety is pretty deep, edge rushers from a 4-3 perspective are very deep, and defensive tackles are kind of thin. So it's an interesting class, but we have a lot of defensive linemen to look at, and a lot of these guys can probably be substituted in for defensive tackles, so keep that in mind. So edge rushers as a whole, a little bit thin, but, you know, what can you do? So either way, let's jump right into it. We'll start off with Ace Tracy from Ole Miss, a 3-4 run stopper, mid-first rounder, A head power, B tackle, B minus power move, 6'5", 296. He's a clear-cut mid-first rounder. Could see him around pick 11, pick 12. Next up is Sean Sewell, or Sewell, however you want to pronounce it, a mid-first rounder out of Auburn. Another run stopper, 6'6", 303. Very good hit power, great power moves, one of the better pass rushers from the interior in this class, and B tackling. So the difference between Tracy and Sewell is pretty much that Tracy's forced more fumbles in his career, and that's really it. I mean, I'd say Sewell's probably a little bit of a better pass rusher, but not as good of a run stopper per se. Next up is Terrell Douglas, the older man on campus out of Louisville. He's 6'7", though. He's absolutely huge. 292, 3-4 versatile. Probably could play interior, maybe even play a little bit on the outside. A little bit heavy, though, to play as an edge guy. B plus power moves, B tackle, B block shed. Very savvy, very good player. Next up is Junior Weston out of Louisville. Played on the opposite side of him. 3-4 versatile, 6'3", 293. B plus tackling, B plus power moves, and B block shed. An early second rounder with the potential to go in the first. A lot of really talented players. I mean, this is just one side of the ball, and you already have 4 guys who are 3-4 guys who might be going in the first round. After that, we jump down a little bit. We have Antoine Shepard out of Minnesota, another 6'7" guy. More of a late 4th rounder. Not much of a pass rusher, but he's a 4-3 run stopper. B tackling, B minus block shed, C plus hit power. Decent player, but has a very big frame and long arms to go with it. After that, we have Malik Joyner, late 6th rounder, 6'6", 252 out of Maine. He's a speed rusher, B minus hit power, C plus tackling, C plus finesse move. One of the few pure speed rushers in this class. Not something to get too excited about, but he at least has shown the capability of playing in that role. Up next is Rashad Smallwood, a 24-year-old out of Stanford. He's a late round pick, but he's a guy who has a relentless motor, 6'5", 295. Good as an interior pass rusher, probably more of a 5 tech than he is an edge guy, maybe even a 3 tech at some point. But good power move to him, good bull rush. Not very good getting off the block. He's going to be a guy who you might throw in as a rotational pass rusher early. He'll be competing for a roster spot because of his motor and because of his alma mater. And lastly, for the left ends, we have Amari Pennell, mid-7th rounder with late 6th potential out of UCF. Another 3-4 run stopper, 6'6", 300 pounds. Pretty good tackling, pretty good block shed. Not much of a pass rusher, but he is an interior run stopper for UCF. On to the right ends, and we have Quandre Durant out of Texas. An early first rounder, 6'4", 256. I think he's too light to be playing in a 3-4. I think he's a guy who you're going to throw on the edge, and he's going to have a lot of success early. 6'4", 256. B power moves, B pursuit, B minus block shed. Really talented player, can play up and down the defensive line. A lot of value. Next up is Dion Grigsby out of USC, another early first rounder, 6'3", 314, a 3-4 run stopper. He's more of a true interior guy, but he's just a stud across the board. Hits hard, really good pass rusher, secures his tackles, gets off blocks pretty well. I mean, these two guys are going to be going high in the first round. Probably both of them going to be top 10 picks. Next up, we have Wesley Owens, a late first rounder out of Notre Dame, 3-4 versatile, 6'6", 298. Good pass rusher, good off the block, another very talented player. There's a lot of value on the defensive line in this class, and Wesley Owens rounds it out very well for the first round. Might have 7 defensive ends who probably play in a 3-4, maybe a little bit in a 4-3, going in round 1. After that, we have Parker James, a 6'4", 307-pounder out of Auburn at 21 years old. He's probably mid-5th. He's one of those mid-day 3 guys. Good tackler, hits hard, pretty good at getting off the block. Not much of a pass rusher, though. He's young as well. Next up is Rashad Hogue out of FIU, another really young guy. He's more of a priority undrafted free agent, late 7th round pick. 6'6", 293. 21 years old, has some upside to him. Good at getting off the block, but still needs to develop a quality pass rush move. Taking a look at the last down lineman is Ali Lockhart from Oklahoma. Late 7th rounder, 6'2", 245, 22 years old. He's a speed rusher. Good move, good rip move off the edge. C+ pursuit, C+ tackle. A guy who you might want to throw into a rotation. Someone you might take a flyer on. He's not going to be a great player, but he could still be a good player. On to defensive tackles, and like I said, not a ton in this class. Only 5 worth mentioning. We'll start things off with Calic Wiley, mid-first rounder, 6'5", 315, 22 years old, out of Auburn, son of Marcellus Wiley. B pursuit, B- block shed, C+ tackling, a mid-first rounder, so we could end up seeing a total of 9 down linemen selected in the first round, as Darquez Mountain is the last guy, late first rounder of Ohio State, 6'3", 287. Not the best player in the world, but he has a lot of upside. Played really well. Tons of production at Ohio State. B- hit power, C+ tackling, C+ power moves. As we drop down, a lot of players who we're not a fan of. Javier Herron, an early 5th rounder out of Penn State, 6'4", 326. He's a nose tackle, big guy. Good tackler, pretty good pursuit, but he's really raw at just disengaging. Lets guys into his frame too much. Definitely a project. After him is Rashard McNary out of Oregon, 6'4", 289. He is a pass rusher from the interior. Very good pass rusher, to say the least. B- pursuit. Not very good in run defense. Gets pushed around a little bit too much. And lastly, we have Ephraim Barrett out of Clemson, another pass rusher. 6'2", 296 at 23 years old. Profile's better as probably about a 3-4 defensive end. B- pursuit, B- power move, C+ tackling as a late 6th rounder. On to left outside linebacker, there's nothing here. There's one player, and he's a good one though. Wes Pitta, 6'2", 243 at 23 years old out of Oklahoma, a 3-4 pass rusher, B hit power, B finesse move, B- block shed. Really, really talented player. Going to be an excellent 3-4 pass rusher. Was overshadowed at Oklahoma. Didn't have the most production, also had an injury in his final season at Oklahoma, which is why he's dropping probably to a mid-4th rounder, but we gave him around a 2nd round, early 3rd round grade. So going to be a really good player in this league for a while. One of the more developed pass rush moves among any edge rusher in this class. On to right outside linebacker. Again, not a lot of guys here worth mentioning. There's only 2. Dane Albert is one of them, a mid-first rounder out of Miami, 6'3", 239 at 24 years old. He's a prototypical type of outside backer, really hard hitter, good tackler, good block shed, can drop into coverage, can rush the passer a little bit. He's going to be a good player, and he's going to be a first rounder for sure. And the last outside backer is Paul Lewis Harris, 6'1", 225 out of FIU. He's a cover 2 guy, a late 6th rounder. Good tackling, good, rip move, good swim move off the edge. Decent hit power, needs to work as a whole. He's not terrible in coverage. It's kind of a role that he played there, but he wasn't the best at it. It's just what they asked of him. But he's a guy who, as a late 6th rounder, might find a niche in this league for sure. On to middle linebackers. Only 3 guys worth mentioning. It's a very thin linebacker class as a whole. We're going to start off with Sam Holacek, an early 1st rounder out of Florida State, 6'1", 243, 23 years old. Good hit power, good tackling, good pursuit, very prototypical. He's going to be a very good linebacker. Want to see how he tests in terms of speed, how he's going to do in coverage. That'll determine whether he's going to end up as purely a 2-down backer or if he's going to be a 3-down guy. Next up is Lindsey McCree, late first rounder out of Michigan State, an excellent tackler at 24 years old, 6'1", 243, hits hard, very instinctive. That extra year at Michigan State paid off. Again, another guy who's a little bit older, but we want to see how he tests, how he works in space. But I think he'll be a very good player as well, at least as a 2-down linebacker. And lastly, we have John Newsome, 6 foot, 244, out of Air Force at 24 years old, 3-4 tackler, B+ hit power, B- pursuit, and C+ tackling, a projected early 4th rounder. On to corners. And there are 3 guys at the top of this draft who have some good talent to them. We're going to start things off with LaMarcus Gregg out of Florida State. He's a pure man-to-man guy. Best man-to-man corner in the draft class, actually. B+ man coverage, C+ zone, C+ press. Really talented players, an early first rounder. 6'2", 193. Definitely a player who would be beneficial to our team. But we need some speed compared to what we already have. So despite the fact that he's an early first rounder, probably outside of our ballpark, not something that I think we can pursue. Sylvester Favors, though, might be someone. He's a late first rounder, 6'2", 189 at 21 years old out of Notre Dame. He's a balanced corner. B- zone, B- press, B- man coverage. But he's big. He has good coverage skills to him, both in man and zone, and he's young. So if we can end up getting him, if he tests well, then I think we'll be really set at that 1 and 2 corner spots. Next up is Marshall Larimore, late first rounder out of Louisville. 5'10", 192, a little bit older at 24. Good coverage skills as a whole, good in press coverage. Another talented player, a little bit older. He might test better than someone like Favors, but we'll have to wait and see exactly. Both of them are pretty good athletes. Next up is VJ Huber, an early 4th rounder out of Oregon, 6'1", 191. Balance, C+ zone, C play rec, C- press. Not exactly refined, but he's at least a decent player out of Oregon. After that, we jump down to Mikel Vitoato out of Ole Miss, 5'10", 193, an early 5th rounder. Good in zone coverage, decent in man, pretty aware as just an overall corner. Might be better suited to switch over to safety. We'll have to see. A little bit light in his frame to be a safety. 5'10", 193, 22 years old. Worth a shot maybe as a 5th rounder. And lastly, we have RT Sutherland, who's a projected undrafted free agent. 6'2", 191 at 22 years old. He is a man-to-man guy from a small school. B-man coverage, C+ zone, C press. Could be a steal as an undrafted free agent, priority guy, or as a late 7th rounder. On to free safety, and here's where there's a lot of talent. We're going to start things off with Keelan Sherman, 6'1", 202 at 21 years old, an early first rounder out of Miami. B-zone coverage, great. C+ pursuit, C+ tackling, checking all the boxes there. Not a big hitter, but as a free safety, he's going to be pretty much covering a lot of ground. 21 years old, he's a stud. Next up is DeAndre Rogers out of Georgia, 6'3", 216, a bigger guy, hits hard, good in zone, good pursuit. He's more prototypical, another guy who could be really talented out there as a late first rounder. Next up is Joey Tolver, a mid-3rd rounder with a late 2nd grade out of Rutgers, 6 foot, 204, 22 years old. He's a zone guy, B- hit power, B- zone, C+ tackling. He's a guy that we could look at in that 2nd, 3rd round area just because of the fact that Von Bell is a free agent. And even though we do have Braxton Yates, we probably will want to add another safety in the offseason. Next up is Arian Shepard, early 5th rounder out of Texas, 6'2", 222, hits like a truck. Good tackling, not so much a coverage safety, probably more of a box safety. Probably fit better as a strong safety as a whole, maybe even as a dime linebacker. But either way, he's a big guy. He hits like a truck. Pretty good player. And next up is Irvin Jamison, 6'1", 219 out of Connecticut. Mid-6th rounder, hits hard. Good tackler. Again, more of a run support guy than anything, which is why they're dropping at this position. On to strong safety, and we have Vidal Grice out of Auburn. 6'2", 215 at 23 years old. He is a zone guy, and he is a really talented player. B hit power, B minus zone coverage, B minus pursuit. Just checks all the boxes. Hits hard, can cover in space. We'll see how fast he is, but as a late first rounder, he could be a steal for somebody. Next up is Corin Mayo out of Boise State, a mid-third rounder, 6 foot 204. Hits pretty well, pretty good in coverage, pretty good tackler. He's a jack of all trades, but he's not a master of any. And that's an interesting player. He's a really balanced guy. Probably more of a day 3 selection than a late day 2, but I could see him sneaking up into the mid-third. And to round things out, we have 3 more safeties. Jarrell Flowers out of Miami, an early 6th rounder. He's a zone guy, can hit pretty hard. 5'10", 201, more of a project, but a good player. Jimmy McCord out of Duke, 6'3", 214 at 22 years old, more of a prototype. Hits hard, decent in coverage, still has some work to do. And lastly, Lacey Galloway out of Harvard. He's an interesting player, mid-7th rounder, 6 foot 195, a little small, but good hit power, pretty good coverage, pretty good tackling. Someone who is a late 7th rounder really could be, or is a late round pick, could be a very talented player and a steal. You know, maybe, depending on how he tests, he could even be a guaranteed special teamer. So, with that, all of that done, I hope you guys enjoyed. This is the prospect spotlight for this season. The season is obviously coming to a close when the combine hits, which you'll see in the first part of the off-season stream that we'll be doing much later. Then I'll update all of that. But if you want to check all this stuff out, take a look at the link in the description. It has all of the players' attributes on a chart. I charted everybody, even the players I didn't show, just because I went through everybody. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Moonlightswami, and I'll be talking to you guys later. Peace!